Okay, welcome everyone to this new episode of Iron Minds. I've got Giuseppe with us today. He's an Italian
Hi
coach.
guys.
I would say one of the most decorated coaches in Italy, one of the most successful
Thank
ones
you.
right now, by far. And he's widely acknowledged as one of the best coaches in Italy. So I thought his stance on many things could be interesting because I think it differs quite a bit from many of the mainstream ideas that we see right now in the powerlifting world. So yeah, how is it going? Tell us a little bit about what kind of period this is, what you're looking forward to, next competitions that you're gonna attend with some of your lifters.
Yeah, okay. Hello everyone. My name is Giuseppe. Starting from your question, my main goal at the moment, my nearest goal, I don't know if this podcast will be published before or after that, is the Junior IPF World Championship in South Africa. I've got one athlete there, Tommaso Buscaroli, which is a 105 kilo junior lifter, born in 2004. So he will have actually another junior year. And he is fifth in the nomination. The podium is not so far, but not so easy. And we're trying to do our best at the moment. He's a very strong guy. Um, he had some months ago, then it has been beaten. He had the Open World Italian total record, 861 and a half, with some margin, I think, in competition. So we're just this is my main focus at the moment. But in the next months of this year, we've got other important goals, other important competitions, such as the FIPE final, which is another federation in Italy which is racing, and the Italian championship, I think, for Cosmiana, the minus 52, because she's an international athlete, and probably you must win the Italian championship to be qualified for the next European or maybe World Championship. I think probably European. And she won the Italian championship of her category for 6 years. So she always won the world championship, the Italian championship. And so we've got a big pressure actually. It will be held in October. And then I've got Luca Angrisano, which is I think a well-known athlete in Italy, and he has the last possible junior competition, which is the European in Slovenia, in November or December, maybe December. And last year he was third. He placed third at the European with a very, very good deadlift, a gold in the deadlift actually. So we're trying our best. We still don't know the nominations, and we're trying to improve our total for sure. Also because he's 10 kilos away from the Italian total record, and actually is not a direct goal for the European competition, but for me personally is a very, very important goal, because actually as a coach I got the possibility to finish this year with 3 Italian Open total records, which actually is the sum of all my goals at the moment. I know all 3 are difficult, I know, but it's the goal. It's a possible, difficult but possible goal, I think. So this is what we are working for at the moment.
Yeah, sounds good. Looks pretty exciting. And yeah,
Thank
also one thing about Tommaso is that like he's like in a couple of years, he emerged with a like, crazy PR after PR. And,
Yeah.
let's say that he's one of those really interesting lifters to watch. And yeah, like also actually, I mean, Luke as well, right? Because I think he's gonna move to the 105s, right?
Yeah, actually, this is the plan, but real life is different.
Okay.
I think it won't be so hard because actually it doesn't hit so much. So I don't think he will have a big struggle
Yeah.
in eating more than now. But we will see. We will see how his body composition will change. I think anyway, the moment of his career is good because he finishes the junior career in 93 kilos. So I think we will take about 1 year and a half when he will compete for sure. But we're not aiming for so hardly, so strongly for the Italian championship in 105. Also because I don't like very, very fast bulks. I prefer that he will go up slowly. Actually, he weighs 95, 96 kilos in off season, and is since 2023, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't think he has so much margin in 93 from a physical body composition point of view. I think we can optimize a little bit of every one of the three lifts. So actually, we can improve our total by, I think, something like 20, 25 kilos if everyone is perfect. But if we want to hope to get a very big jump, I think we're obliged to change category. But he's young.
Yeah.
He will be 23 in a few days. So anyway, he's young and
Yeah.
he surely has got margin. First of all, I don't know if this will be one of the next questions, but I don't like very, very fast in improving in kilos. Anyway, if they come naturally, we're happy, sure. But I think that at the moment, especially in Italy, but for sub juniors most of all, and also with junior athletes, I think we're pushing a little bit too fast because yeah, for example, Luca, he's got the last junior competition, and for sub juniors almost always the international competition is the last sub junior competition. So they're trying to push very, very hard, and I think we've got a little bit too high injury rate in very, very young athletes. So no rush at all. The senior career lasts like 17 years, so we're just trying to be healthy and to put on weight slowly, and we will see in the next 2 or 3 years. I think we will see a good 105 Luca. Yeah.
Hmm. And in terms of handling younger lifters, like what do you think about using high intensities versus like building a solid base? That is the difference between, I would say, building and trying to express strength. What do you think the right yeah, I would say the right balance is?
Mm. Okay. So from my point of view, I know how other coaches work, so I can already say that this is a difference from the other coaches. I prefer to build most of the time. But building strength doesn't mean to stress out so much some parameters such as volume, intensity, but building means building technique, building good condition, sometimes building health because it's not obvious, especially at the moment. And if I think about expressing strength, yeah, I think I'm pretty good at peaking in competition, but I don't like to express strength in training. I'm happy if my athletes are weaker in training than in competition. I don't like to calculate the possible competition results with very high precisions, basing on the performance in training. Meaning by I'm talking about kilos or even RPE. So, for example, if my athletes have to do 300 kilograms, for example, squatting competition, I'm not obliged to put in program a 300 kilo single or a 290 kilo single, which must be fast, RPE 8, because I rely very much on the peaking on the last weeks. So I think obviously training must have ondulations like peak loads in some cases. Actually, this is very different basing on the athlete we're talking about. But yeah, I think that expressing strength, I mean expressing maximal strength, is something that comes only in competition. The best shape must be only in competition.
Uh-huh.
So I actually, if we're talking about this, I just build strength all the year long.
Mm-hmm. And so, what would be your critique to the classics, RPE 6, 7, 8, 9 with the top set and then back off, kind of more like, in the mainstream American style right now? Like, is it something that you ever use? Do you never use it, and why?
Okay, I've got a pretty direct answer. I don't use RPE on variations. I don't write RPEs on variations, almost never, because I think that the variation itself is a very good limit, a very good parameter to limit the load I want to put on the athlete. So I think that if the athlete is perfect with the variation, he doesn't jump seconds, for example, in super slows descent or stops. If he fulfills perfectly what I expect from the variation, he or she can actually go even RPE 9, 9.5, sometimes even 10, actually, because the variation itself will limit the load. For example, if we got 6 reps with a 5-second descent and he perfectly does the descent in 5 seconds, I think that going below RPE 9 is not so common. We always push till almost until the limit, but the variation itself will limit very much the load because I like to use hard variations actually. While on the other side, I program RPE progressions with the competitive lift, because in that case the load will be usually higher. And another important aspect, the psychological side, because the athlete will try to push harder on the competitive lifts because he wants to. Yeah, I think that the main reason is that he wants to know how much can he do in the next competition. So in that case, programming RPE is just putting a limit on the athlete and letting he or she know that in that particular day, I don't want him to push so hard. For example, if I write RPE 6 or RPE 7, yeah, I never go RPE 10 on the competitive lift because, as I said before, this is possible only in competition, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And so this raises an interesting question about the taper, right? Because during
Yes.
a taper, one of the most common strategies is keeping the intensity very high and reducing the tonnage, reducing the volume. What do you think about this?
Okay. From a general point of view, this is quite right. Obviously, if I'm like 16 weeks far from the competition, the average intensity will be lower than the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, for example, and the average volume will be probably higher. But this is not so strict. And actually, we've got two types of taper, I think. This is what we say in our courses, actually. Yeah, I will put the taper in two main categories, which are the cyclic taper and the acyclic taper. I don't know if it's correct in
Yeah.
English. So the cyclic taper it's something similar to, I think, the American like Mike to
Yes.
Shiver method. So we build a block, which is usually between 3, but most probably 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes 6. But personally, I don't have any athlete who works well with 6 weeks block. Most of the time is 4 or 5. And if we see that that block works well, we try to use it again to pick in the competition. So the fourth of fifth week will be the competition, but little difference between me and maybe Mike Tushir, for example, is that the length of the block can be the same of other periods of the year, but anyway, I deload a little bit the last week or the last 2 weeks. So in any case, I put some little variations on something on the training schedule, while probably the previous blocks are just have a raising pattern. Yeah, while in the last block I can put very small variations, but obviously I don't destroy the pattern because if it works well, we don't have a reason to change it radically. While the other type of taper is the acyclic taper, which is actually Russian, I think, Sovietic method. So the general rule is first period, first block, high volume, low intensity. Second block is little bit lower volume, but not so lower, and high intensity until the highest load of all the macro cycle. And when we hit the maximal load, then the taper starts. And the taper in this kind of programs is just the deload. So the taper starts right on the peak single, and then we slowly go down for 2 or 3 weeks. Actually, depends on the lift and it depends on the level of the athlete. For example, in the deadlift, especially if we've got a very, very strong deadlifter, yeah, and most of my athletes actually are deadlifters. In that case, we've got the peak single very far from the competition, like 3 weeks before, but we're not talking about a cyclic program. So we go up, 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 peak single, and then we slowly go down. This is very different because in the American style block, I don't know, I know that not all the American coaches work like that, but this is the way actually we call it in Italy. Yeah, in that kind of block, you hit maybe the last single 4 or 5 weeks before the competition, and then go you drop down and then you build another block. While in this case, you you are in that single and you slowly go down, and then in the competition you've got a peak. So this is not so intuitive, but I saw that it works very, very well on gifted deadlifters. So, and maybe this is the more, maybe the oldest method of programming that I use, because I've changed sometimes in the years. Obviously, I'm young anyway. My athletes are as well evolving, but uh, I don't want to change that actually, because I see that it works pretty well if we're talking about strong deadlifters.
Hmm. And so when it comes to these ideas, which are, pretty, I would say, atypical right now in the powerlifting world,
Yeah.
who has been your biggest influence over the years? And, can you tell us a little bit about your evolution, your first steps in the sport, and, what they were like, and who shaped your thinking the most?
Okay. First of all, I tell shortly my story. At the moment, I'm 30. I started powerlifting at 17, just like most of the guys of that era, that geological area. Um, so I started powerlifting just because I saw something on the internet. I went to the gym and I liked to be as strong as possible. So I discovered that that was a sport. At the moment, at that time, we had Facebook groups and forums, and I trained with a guy, Valentino Durastanti, which lives in my town, and we started to compete in powerlifting, and we found a team which was held by Ado Gruzza, which I think is one of the most I would say influencer of powerlifting in Italy, but yeah, he is actually not a uh, influencer as you would say now. But he was a coach, first of all. He held some courses, and he was our coach. He has been our coach for many years. Actually, he's still Valentino's coach. Now, at the moment, I'm not an athlete, so I train myself. I don't work out so much, but period was high or low periods. But anyway, Ado is my first coach, so he's obviously my my main reference point, I think. And Ado himself had a very long career in coaching in powerlifting, and I think that he's especially in the first times he was heavily influenced by the Soviet method, especially Boris Sheiko method, who came to Italy with Ado in some seminars, and yeah, so he, as somebody knows, Sheiko uses only percentages. I don't know if in the last years he changed something, but I don't think so. He's very schematic, uses percentages and volume calcs, which you can find actually in his programs, which are some Excel sheets. You will find the volume calcs, average intensities, something like that. He was very, very precise, very, very, I would say, mathematical in his method. Yeah, and I think that my method at the moment is a little bit hybrid from the Russian and the European and and the American method. Yeah, even in the same week, for example, I've got a day which could be Sheiko-like method, and for example, one other day which could be to shear-like method. So I try to conjugate both and to make them work together in the long term, because yeah, the main difference I think is not on the percentage versus RPE, so ramping. But I think that the most difficult aspect to conjugate is the timing of the programming, because as I said before, the Soviet method is a very, very long program with a final deload before the competition, while the American method is almost always cyclic. So this is what I try to conjugate. Obviously, it depends on the athlete. From a general point of view, I think that the lighter, younger, and maybe less strong athlete will work well with the Soviet method. So with percentages, with a non-cyclic program, and with a pretty high volume, because Sheiko generally has a pretty high total volume inside the week, while a more expert athlete, which who needs like frequent deload weeks, free very very strong ondulation uh, along the program. Yeah, in that case, I will prefer the American-like method mostly. Yeah.
Hmm. And is there anything that you changed your mind about compared to 10 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, write this, because 10 years ago, first of all, 10 years ago, I was not a coach. I started coaching 8 years ago, but obviously 10 years ago, I was an athlete. So I was anyway very, very interested in programming. I saw all the possible videos, or I read everything that was online in that period. At the moment, maybe it's impossible, because there are very, very much more information. So in that period, yeah, I used the Sheiko method. Yeah, in 2014, 2015, another European method was pretty famous, which was the Norwegian method. Actually, when I joined the powerlifting team, our powerlifting team, Ado was trying to to use actually the Norwegian method. It was like a short period in that sense. Norwegian method, which was generally like that. You've got a very, very high frequency, but yeah, it actually was called the frequency project, I think. Yeah, like even 6 quotes a week, but with very, very strong variations. For example, even sometimes I saw some free weight squat on the Bosu ball. Actually, this is an extreme, but anyway, they use the variations and ondulation to be able to go on with very very high frequency. Obviously, Americans at the moment which use maybe 2-3 squats a week, they don't have very 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 extremely light days. So yeah, what I changed my mind about so is actually the method, because when I was younger I thought that the progress was very very related to the volume, to the workload capacity. So I think that going on with the career, you had to do always much much more. So yeah, more volume, but sometimes even higher average intensity. And yeah, so I thought that the strong athlete was a very resilient athlete, but at the moment I can see that probably is the opposite, because a very very strong athlete has obviously higher loads on his back, so he has a higher injury risk. But even if we're not talking about injury, uh, overload risk. So I changed my mind in that sense. So I put more deload weeks, and if we're talking about cyclic methods obviously have deload weeks in the in the method, inside the right inside the method. So we don't have to actually program deloads. So yeah, as right when my athletes improve, I slowly go in the direction of the American method. Yeah, and I think that in Italy, the main problem with the male powerlifting, because actually in the female powerlifting we don't have problems actually, because we've got like 1,000 total athletes. I mean, male and female together. So female will be 300 or 400, and we've got two world champions, two recent world champions, which are Saranaldi and Carola Garra. Chiara Bernardi got some second place at the world. So Italy as a team is very very small but very very strong in the females. So I think we're very good in coaching female athletes. But in male the male powerlifting, the problem is that we've got a high injury rate, because we've got some strong junior lifters. We had some very, very strong sub junior lifters who ended actually their careers at 19 years old due to injuries, or due to, even small injuries. But at that age, maybe you just change your mind about your life. So you've got an injury, a back injury for example, when you're 18, and then you just quit powerlifting because you don't want to yeah surely you don't want to take some risks. So I think that the main goal for very, very gifted athletes is to train as long as possible. I mean, years, or decades, and avoid injuries. If a very gifted 70 years old athlete trains without big stops for 20 years, he will become a monster. But in Italy, we've never had these cases, because all the gifted athletes stopped early. The only one at the moment who was a very very strong sub junior lifter is Gabriele Bellomo. When he was at his last sub-junior year in Italy, he won the overall prize. I remember he was in that in that year, which was I think 2020. He was the best sub-junior of all time. Now, obviously, in the next years, some lifters did more, but he was the strongest sub-junior. He had a brilliant junior career, and then he's the strongest senior lifter in Italy. He's still young. He's now finishing the first senior year, actually. But anyway, he's the only one who was a strong sub-junior, and he he reached the international level in senior class. So my hope is that Luca Angrisano, which is just 1 year younger than Bellomo, will have the the same long career because yeah, I said many other sub-junior lifters who were younger than Gabriele Bellomo and even stronger in the sub-junior year. Now they've just quitted. So I think that the main factor is that one, and to obtain this continuity all over the years, the main factor is health, is physical health, and also psychological balance. Yeah, just to keep training and maybe such methods like the Soviet method, high volume approaches, could lead to overuse injuries, long term injuries. So what I changed my mind about is actually that one. So more sustainability all over the weeks, the blocks, and the years. Yeah.
Interesting. And so you basically describe two guardrails, right? Which is the psychological balance, the injury rates. But what is your hypothesis behind improvement in strength? That is, certain people believe it's the dose, the amount of work that you do. Certain people believe it's the pacing, that is, the way you dictate the rhythm, right, along the weeks. Other people believe that it's the frequency, right? So, what is your idea about what it takes to improve someone's strength, keeping in mind the two guardrails that you said, that is the psychological balance and the injury rates?
Yeah, the answer is not direct because I think it's more difficult than people tend to think about because the all the aspects you mentioned now are connected between each other. So, for example, if you change the volume dose, the the pace could change. The peaking time, the length of the block could change. For example, we I think that the length of the block is not so immutevole,
Yeah,
unchanging.
yeah, unchangeable.
Yeah, unchangeable. Because, for example, if we start the block with a higher intensity, the block this is a simple example. The block will be shorter because we cannot improve if we start very high. So they're all connected. Yeah, frequency is obviously connected mainly to the volume, I think, because the approach could be, for example, high volume, low frequency, or lower volume and higher frequency. So we call it more distributed and less polarized, maybe. And I think that during the career of an athlete, this could change. I've got a golden rule about that, but obviously this is subjective. You can change it, you can adapt it on different athletes, but I think that when a guy starts powerlifting, he should focus on improving his workload capacity if we're talking about a young beginner. While yeah, on the maybe on in during the first year, so we cannot have a so high frequency because we must have high volume inside the day. So maybe 2, 3 squats per week with the bench. I will not go higher than 4 benches a week, sometimes even 3. And then when the beginner becomes an intermediate, yeah, I think that the threshold actually is when you start to improve, when you reduce the volume. When you start improving, reducing the volume, you're an intermediate that wants to become elite athlete. So in that situation, maybe I can raise the frequency and lower the volume, but maybe the total volume in the week is still the same. While going on, and maybe if I see that the athlete has some small injuries, small problems, yeah, and I see that a lift, for example, is causing problems, then in that case, I lower the frequency a little bit without raising the volume. So we slowly become a higher level athlete because higher level athletes usually don't train so much. If we compare it to my beginner style athlete, so which is a Sovietical method, where the volume is very high. Talking about numbers, for example, a beginner can have uh, 30 rep squat in just one day. The other day 20 or 25, and the other day 15 to 20. And this is an overall training volume which is higher than we see online usually. Sometimes in extreme programs such as a small squat program, which is really extreme, we can also have, let me think, uh, about more than 10, more than 100 training lifts during the week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously, I will not recommend it to an elite, advanced athlete.
Hmm.
So I think that in the period of the career of an athlete, when he becomes very, very strong, I mean over 105 IPF points, just to have an idea. Yeah, he will probably train less than before.
Okay. And why do you think that is? Is that because of the impact of the high loads on the recovery side of things?
Yeah, it's the impact of the loads for sure, but also the time of his life that he spent training, because some small injuries, uh, I'm talking about overuse injuries. Yeah, you accumulate the problems during the career. So yeah, it's the loads, but it's also the length of the time he has been exposed to that loads. For example, if we take a super gifted athlete uh, who reaches 300 kilo squat in 1 year, and another athlete who reaches 300 squat at the same body weight in 10 years, the second case will be more stressed than the first one, which is probably improving very fast. And probably he will also be older, obviously. So yeah, this is one reason. Another reason, yeah, is actually age, because Usually, if you train continuously, I think you must improve at least until 30 years old, but maybe 35 is better. So obviously, when your level will be higher, you will be older. So this is probably another factor. Yeah.
Interesting. And do you think it's also due to the fact that most people nowadays have a job in powerlifting, even if they are competitive athletes, and therefore cannot dedicate their entire life to it?
Yeah. Actually, it depends on the job for sure. Because sometimes very, very young athletes just go to school or university. University actually, in some cases, could be hard, actually. Maybe not physical harder than some manual jobs. But for example, many, many strong athletes at the moment are just influencer or maybe just coaches, online coaches, or they just work in the gym. And if you are able to organize your day, your week, I don't think that jobs are very, very stressful. For example, some kinds of university, I think that could be more stressful than that kind of life, I admit. So maybe age is not obviously for sure a factor because yeah, young athletes usually go to university while a 25, 28 years old strong athlete could work with powerlifting or coaching usually. Um, while on the other side, if we got a 35 years old man who has, for example, a family, for example, young kids, yeah, in that case, it will be harder. So, for example, Valentino, which is my uh, which has been my training partner when I started. Now he has a 3 years old daughter, and especially the first year, obviously he had some sleep problems. And he worked in the same time. Sometimes he worked at night. So obviously, in that case, is not the age, is not the work, but is maybe the family situation. So yeah, in that case, obviously the workload cannot be the same as when he was 23. And yeah, he worked, but he lived with his parents, so he didn't have such responsibilities, obviously.
Of course, yes. So yeah, like we talked about a few concepts already, and I think it's the right moment to ask you the question that I always ask everyone. That is to rank these six variables that are somehow related to strength expression. That is,
Yeah,
on the one hand, programming, technique, and genetics, which are more, yeah, I would say like those are the three factors that most people think about. And then
yeah.
more of the social aspect, that is the psychological traits of the athlete, the lifestyle, and the coach to athlete relationship. So the first category I would
Okay.
say is more technical and scientific. The second one is more on the social, psychological side of things.
Yeah, personal. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh,
what would you say if you had to rank these and attribute a percentage in terms of importance to each of
mm.
these 6 points?
Yeah, I've got just one question. What do you mean by social aspect precisely?
Yeah. So here I said lifestyle, coach athlete relationship, and psychological traits of the athlete. So
Ah, okay, yeah.
yeah. So
Okay,
it's
okay,
those
okay,
those three basically. So yeah,
okay, okay,
psychological
okay.
traits in terms of resilience and so on. And yeah,
Mm. Okay, first of all, I think it's obviously genetics, but genetic itself doesn't allow you to win the world championship because you obviously have to train. No human being can hit 120 IPF points without going to the gym, obviously. But yeah, so I think that the genetic, if we're talking about a percentage, a mathematical percentage of the kilos you can lift, yeah, genetic is the first is the first one. As I said, sometimes I saw a guy in the gym actually lifting 220 kilos deadlift. He was 17 the first day in the gym. Some people still at the moment don't lift 220 kilos deadlift. So if even all the factors are at the maximum level, but you have a bad genetics, there's nothing you can do to reach that very, very high level. So first one is genetic, but I would say that psychological aspects actually are parts of the genetic, because yeah, surely your family, your life experience can determine who you are and how your mind works, but I think that some aspects of that are genetical, uh, or maybe depend on what you do with your parents, maybe in the first 2 years of your life, something like that, just like resilience, for example. So I will put that aspects maybe together, but because I think that psychological aspects are quite genetically determined. Anyway, the second aspect is technique, but it doesn't mean that the coach must oblige the athlete every single training session to do what the coach thinks about, like do this, do that, open your knees, straighten your back, or kind of that. But I think that technique, which is actually the movement, how you move, how you do the lift, actually influences very, very heavily the programming. So that's the reason why I put technique over programming uh, on the top of programming, because the programming cannot be totally separated from the technique. And when you change your technique, you probably must change something in the program. For example, if you've got a very, very stressful lift, such as I don't know, a very rounded back deadlift. I know that this is a stupid example, but yeah. In that case, for example, you cannot push so hard on the volume, because you will have probably an overuse injury or overuse problem. And yeah, so for example, if a lift come very, very natural to the athlete, he can use a higher volume. I will make an example. Tommaso Buscaroli and Luca Angrisano. Actually, Tommaso, yeah, obviously he's a 105 and not a 93, but anyway, he's a little bit stronger than Luca in the squat. Anyway, even if we think about the different category, he's a higher level squatter. But for Tommaso, the squat comes very, very natural. So he can use a higher volume because actually he likes the lift. He doesn't have a negative stress. While Luca, for example, who is a deadlifter, he doesn't have very long femurs, but he has a stronger back, for example, stronger posterior chain. So his squat is a little bit more stressful, I think. So Luca uses lower frequency 2 times per week. With Tommaso now we're going down to 2 squats per week, but I'm not sure about it. but surely lower volume than Luca. Sorry, the lower volume with Luca than Tommaso's volume. Even if we're talking about heavy loads, with Tommaso, he did 334 kilo squat, but I think that he's 1 year younger than Luca. He competed less years. Squats come very natural. So in that case, the way he moves let me know that he he likes squat. He doesn't have a negative stress, so I can use a higher volume. This is what I talk about when I talk about technique. This is what I mean when I talk about technique. Then I think that technique is anyway very very important. If we're talking about a beginner, obviously the coach have a very very important role in imposing technique. Obviously, when the athlete becomes more experienced, in some cases, and that is one other important aspect of the coach. In some cases, he naturally finds the right technique. So, in elite athletes, the coach role is not to impose the technique, but to understand what he can change, but they are always small changes, and what he has to leave to the athlete instinct. So this is what a good coach should do, and it's very difficult because, for example, if something goes wrong, you don't know if you have to change drastically or just to change something in the program. So yeah, always all the factors come together: programming, volume, frequency, technique. That's why I think that coaching is an art, is not a science. Because if we think about coaching from mm, from a mathematical point of view, the risk is to isolate the factors too much. I see that many coaches do that. For example, I actually don't trace the loads, volume, kind of that, because I don't think that the mathematical aspect is so important. But just because if I change something in the technique, then my ideal volume, for example, can change. So I cannot write it in a scientific way. Then, if we're talking about the social aspects of the athlete, I think that the first one is lifestyle, just because if you do a very tiring life, or for example you go out, you drink, or even something worse every day, you surely cannot recover and cannot focus on the training. But if you got a decent lifestyle, then it doesn't become so important. For example, if you go out but you sleep 7 hours per night, you won't have a very very high benefit in staying at home all the nights, or sleeping 9 hours a day. Yeah, in that case, the difference, I don't think it's not so much. Maybe it's better to have a happy life, I think. Yeah, I see that many athletes just focus so much on training that this becomes worse, because they become obsessed. If something goes wrong, they have a psychological crisis. For example, if your life is just for training, and for example, I always say, you fall on the street when you're walking, for example, and you got a bone fracture, for example, then what will you do in your life? So yeah, I think that having a complete social life is very important in athletes. So if we just have a decent lifestyle, uh, the second social aspect is the coach to athlete relationship. Actually, I tend to be very friendly with my athletes, usually with my stronger athletes, but not because just for one reason, because we usually go to international competitions, so we always travel together. And actually, obviously, Cosmiana, which is one of my strongest female athletes, is my girlfriend, so that's obvious. Luca actually is my friend. He lives near to me, so we get along well. We see often. Yeah. So, but I think this is sometimes a limit for me, because being too friendly, especially with the high level athletes, which who can have a certain independence, especially on the technique or even in some programming choices, the risk is that I lose all my authority, and I always have to convince, I have to fight with the athlete to impose something that I think I must impose. But anyway, I think that the athlete must trust the coach, and I think they do at the end of the day. So I have to explain why I make every choice, because, for example, they don't want to do a certain thing. But I think that in the years, yeah, the risk was higher in the first years, because the athlete maybe, yeah, they became stronger, and so they thought they knew what they had to do. But I think that we found a better balance in the last 2 years. So at the moment, I think, yeah, we got a good balance. Anyway, I think the coach, if we're talking about the relationship between coach and athlete, another important aspect is that the coach must understand if the athlete claims are true or not. Because one example is that all the athletes say, I can't do a high volume. Everybody says that. Because I got tired, I lose my good shape. Sometimes it's real, sometimes they're just lazy. So you have to understand if you must impose and how much you have to impose, for sure. So yeah, so the relationship is based on how much you have to be the friend of your athlete. But another important aspect is how much the coach has to trust the athlete, and it's very very difficult to understand. For example, Luca. Yeah, what I mostly like about Luca is that he's a very very smart and also, yeah, expert guy at the moment. So but also Cosmiana. So when they say something very, and what they say is very precise on the technique or on the program, at the moment I tend to trust them, for example. While Tommaso, I think, is very, very strong, but maybe not so expert, not so experienced. He only had one international competition, so I actually have to fight to impose something to him. Hello,
Mm.
Tommaso, if you're watching.
Exactly, yeah. And so I want to go back to one point, the technique to programming relationship, because I
Yeah.
think what you said could be seen as a pretty hot take. I think most people would say the opposite. Most people would say that programming is more important and technique comes after, because we see a lot of people with suboptimal technique who are at the top, right? And so with the right dose, even if technique is a bit suboptimal, you can lower the dose a little bit, whatever, but it can still be, around there at that threshold, and many people can still get strong. Whereas with optimal technique, if the dose is not right, it's more difficult, right? Because sure, your movement is optimal, but the stimulus is not there. So I think this is pretty interesting. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I assume that the bad or good programming, yeah, it's important, but we're not talking about crazy programming. Obviously, if you train once a month or 5 times a day, yeah, in that case, obviously, this is an extreme case. Yeah, in that case, programming becomes more important in a negative way. So, yeah. But I think that if the program has a quite good, sense, then technique becomes important just yeah, just to the small changes of the program. Okay, so yeah, maybe programming technique and then programming again. But I don't disagree with actually with your previous claim, because I think that elite athletes, by elite athletes I mean people who take a podium at the world championship. I don't think it is possible that they have a bad technique. Maybe their technique can be particular, obviously very individual, maybe not a standard technique from a not so expert point of view, but I think that all the lifts are efficient, because if it was not like that, they would not be so strong, or maybe they could have an injury. Yeah, I think that it's very difficult to understand what a good technique is. Surely, if we're talking about elite athletes, which are naturally gifted to powerlifting or to a specific lift, yeah, in that case, the technique becomes very individual. The role of the coach in technique improvement maybe becomes less important, but as I said before, it becomes important to understand what to leave to the athlete's instinct. But I don't think that a very, very strong athlete can have a bad technique. So in that case, the technique I think is still very important, but the difference is that the athletes find it naturally. So you can see as a result very, very different technique. But for example, if you see my athletes, especially in the deadlift, they're very, very different from each other. So in some cases, just because I set the technique in different ways, sometimes, for example, yeah, with Tommaso, which is very gifted but not in the deadlift, I just say one or two things and then I let the program do the job. So I just corrected one little thing, for example, how to place the feet on yeah, below the bar. But for example, the timing of the slack, or the angle of the torso, and also the curvature of the back, I just let him do almost by himself. Yeah. While on the other side, Luca, which is actually a more gifted deadlifter than Tommaso, in that case, I think that Luca's deadlift is very, very, very artificial. But that's because actually I think that I understood very well his technique, because actually it was my technique when I competed the last years. But just he has a better genetic and better leverages. So I exactly know what his feelings are. So in that case, I exactly know what to say and what to change, or what maybe can just depend on a phase of the program. For example, if he's slow from the floor, it just means that he's tired. So I rely on the peaking. But this is actually a final goal that you reach in many years. So yeah, it depends. It depends. But I'm sure that he could not reach this technique on his own. I have to be honest.
And
Yeah.
so, what do you say to the people who believe the body knows how to self-organize? Because someone is more on the bottom-up side of things and
Yeah.
believes that with the right program, the brain of the athlete can find the better positioning for themselves, and you have to guide them a little bit, but then it's more of a discovery process.
Actually, I don't think this is true in any sport, because if you watch every sport, every possible sport, you've got a coach who tells what to do. He could tell it in a more strong way or a less strong way, but yeah, but I don't think that the instinct of the human being is perfect. Never, never. Neither if we're talking about technique, uh, but also in programming. Yeah, I think that the coach has an important role anyway. And then if the technique was not so important and the body knows how to organize, you will not see technique of the athlete changing during the years, while in reality it changes. So I think that it changes because of the coach, or even because of the athlete himself, who maybe tries a little to change something little, and then, for example, in one period, he would feel better in one way, and then in another period, he will change and feel better in another way. And I think that the role of the coach is also to understand that. So yeah, in that case, it's anyway an imposition. I will make another example. Uh, I do one competition and my squat is very good with a wide stance. Then I start to not feel so well with that wide stance. So maybe 3 months later, I close a little bit my stance and it works well. But going on, I don't feel it. I don't feel it well no more. So a good coach could say, try to open your stance again, for example, because he knows that the narrow stance could be just good for a short period of time. So I think there's always something you can change, especially on the setup. Yeah, maybe the timing, if we're talking about a very, very gifted athlete, the timing of muscle activation could be more instinctive, actually, but the setup is artificial. I don't think that the best squatters that you can see now at the works. When they started, they had the same setup. Obviously, I know that this is because if the body changes uh, its composition, the technique changes. But I think they or their coach always make some choices. So choices are technique. Just I just think that. So if the technique was totally instinctive, everyone should be perfect in 3 or 4 months. But it's not like that. You always yeah. For example, Emil Norling, just to take an example, he was a phenomenal conventional deadlifter. He switched to sumo at Sheffield, so a few months ago. And if the technique was already perfect because he was a elite deadlifter, then he shouldn't have changed anything, but he did.
Hmm. And so this raises an interesting question. That is, um, on a day-to-day basis, how do you coach technique? That is, say that an athlete of yours is going through a, like I would say normal period, like, things are okay. Like they're not
Yeah.
terrible, they're not perfect. And then they have one session where they don't feel good. What is your first approach to that? Like, do you think about changing a couple of technical things? Do you think that there's something problematic in the programming? Do you think that it's normal because it's just a random fluctuation? Um, do you wait for a few sessions in a row to go bad? Like, because what you're saying, of course, as in any case, makes sense when you find the balance, right? Because if you go too far with that, then every single session you're changing something. You're
Yeah.
going into like sort of like I would say like paranoid mode where like you keep changing every single thing so that it feels perfect, but then you don't realize that you're training a different movement every time, right? And then it becomes a vicious circle. So what do you think about this?
Yeah. Okay. About your first question, if just one session doesn't go well for any reason, if it's really just one session, I don't worry at all. I just wait to see some sessions in a row, and I try to understand if that's a programming or a technique problem. Actually, sometimes I ask to send a lightweight video to understand if, yeah, for example, the athlete is just tired or overloaded, or maybe the weight is just too heavy in some cases, or maybe the problem is actually technique. So I try to, first of all, the main thing is understanding where the problem is. But I think that sometimes athletes just lose their technique without any real reason, real programming reason. For example, uh, then I think that technique actually is divided in two aspects. One is the setup, and the setup does not depend on the program, does not depend on the shape. For example, stance in the squat, or maybe wrist position in the bench press. While, for example, timing or the bar path, yeah, that could depend on the physical status of the athlete. So yeah, I would say that it depends on the type of error. If it's a setup error, yeah, I will change it suddenly. Yeah, uh, immediately. I mean, immediately. But sometimes I actually lie to the athlete because, for example, if I know that the technique is under construction, I decided the setup, and I think that the athlete just have to go on and to develop the individual technique, because yeah, as I said, sometimes this is the reality. I just say it's okay, it's perfect, while I know it's not, but I hope it will become in the next few weeks, for example. So I say to the athlete, it's good when he moves how I want him to move in that period. But it doesn't mean that this is his final perfect technique for his peak level. While obviously, if we got a beginner that every session does something different, something wrong, and yeah, something wrong, but in different ways, I know that then the problem is the focus, and I have to be to be strict in that case, and I just must tell them what to do, and they have to do it. Full stop.
I see. Okay. So yeah, I would say that on the technique side of things, you tend to err a bit more toward the top-down side, right? That is, you don't believe that technique is something that self-organizes a lot. And what about programming? Like, are you receptive to, I would say, atypical bottom-up feedback from the athlete, from the body of the athlete, or do you tend to impose your ideas a bit more, your experience and so on?
Okay. First of all, in some cases, I think that the athlete must be a little bit overloaded. Obviously, not so much. Yeah, and in that case, for example, the athlete says, "I'm tired. My lifts are slow, are not so brilliant." While I know that the program, for example, in the next few weeks, will have a deload. So in that case, I just go on with the program I wanted to give him. But I think that the bottom up approach is not only in listening what the athlete says, but sometimes is just watching the lift, watching, yeah, the technique, the speed, and maybe changing something in the program, but without a direct dialogue with the athlete. For example, I see that the athlete becomes too slow on the squat descent. I know that I have to put some higher reps, but maybe I just see it and do it in the program. But it's not because the athlete says I want to do higher reps, for example. Yeah. So in that, yeah, if we're talking about that, I think that I use I also use a little bit of a bottom-up approach, but I know that probably my approach is more top-down than other coaches. Yeah, I would say yes. But yeah, I think yeah, this is one of the example, as I said before, about why the technique influences the programming. But I'm not talking about technique from a basic point of view. I'm talking about how the path of the barbell changes uh, along the weeks, for example. So if I know that something happens, maybe I just have to change something in the program. So yeah, this is a bottom up approach based on technique, I would say. Mm.
Interesting. And yeah, so this makes me think about velocity tracking. What do you think about it, in order to say, to gather instantaneous feedback from the athlete and from how the lift is moving? right? Because velocity, of course, tells us a little bit about, I mean, it's giving us some signal about, whether the athlete is in shape and, how their strength is evolving. And what do you think about other tools for prescribing loads? That is percentages, RPEs, ranges, and so on.
I didn't understand actually the first question. You were talking about instant feedbacks.
So I was talking about velocity tracking. Like, what do you think about velocity tracking in order to get
Okay.
some feedback about the
Okay, okay,
velocity of
okay.
the.
No, actually not. Yeah, obviously I watch lifts on my phone. Yeah, because I want to get a video almost of every session, 1 or 2 videos per lift per session, and I try to watch it in 24 or 48 hours maximum. Obviously, yeah, the velocity is an important parameter, just to know how much the lift is easy or difficult. But I don't think that tracing the velocity with a scientific method such as tool. Nowadays there are many tools for the bar path or for the bar velocity. I don't think they're so important because velocity, or maybe they can also be harmful because the velocity itself um, doesn't say how much margin you've got on the lift, and mm, what's the shape, the physical shape of the athlete. Because, for example, the position of the sticking point maybe is more important. For example, if you've got a bench press which has a high average velocity, but you've got a sticking point in a very, very high phase of the lift, for example, in the lockout, I know that the problem is that you've lost your setup of the shoulder blades, and it's not a weakness in the triceps, for example. But maybe the velocity tracker says that the lift is fast, that the lift has a high average velocity and maybe a high peak velocity, but it doesn't mean anything because, for example, with 5 kilos more, the athlete will lose worsley the setup, and maybe he will have problem with the lockout. Yeah. For example, if we talk about the grinding capacity of an athlete, I think that, yeah, that is a genetical aspect too, but it depends on the technique, actually, on the setup. If we've got a very, very good, very, very efficient technique, we will be able to grind more. Many people think maybe think the opposite way, but I think that if the athlete is able to grind for a very, very long time, or for a long part of the bar path, then the technique is good. It doesn't have breaking points. So yeah, that is what I mean by a good technique, actually. A grindable lift. So in that cases, for example, maybe the velocity would say that you don't have a very, very high projected max, and so I don't rely very much on that. Yeah, actually,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it will be quite good in the bench press if we've got a very solid technique, but just to have a confrontation of 1 week of a lift of 1 week and maybe a lift of 8 weeks later, but it's not necessary. I can just compare the two videos and to know which one is faster. For example, if I lift 200 kilos now and 200 kilos in 1 month, but I think that having a video is okay.
Hmm. Yeah. So when when I will release this episode, it will have already happened. But in a couple of weeks, there's gonna be a live debate between Kedrick and Marcellus Williams about velocity.
Yeah.
Because Kedrick believes that tracking velocity helps and is something that adds some value to coaching someone, whereas Marcellus believes it's the least useful of the
Mm.
prescription tools. So it will be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I think so that anyway the velocity is an important aspect, but tracking it in a very scientific way maybe is too much and it leads to some misunderstandings actually. Yeah. But obviously if I see that my athlete moves uh 85% single in a competitive lift and it's very slow, obviously there are some problems in the program. So yeah, in that cases, velocity is surely an important parameter. Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry.
And what if you, because I mean many of your points about not tracking metrics, for example, or not tracking velocity and so on, seem to be related to the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of interdependent variables, right, that interact with each other and therefore prevent you a little bit from being really scientific about how things are evolving. So
Yeah.
what if in 10 years we managed to remove some of that uncertainty? For example, when it comes to velocity tracking, what if you combine it with 3D sensors on the body that tell you not only how the barbell is moving, but also how the 3D
So,
skeleton
so,
of
so
the animal.
sorry, I couldn't hear the question well.
Yeah. So I was saying, what if you combine on top of velocity tracking that tells you the velocity of the barbell? What if you combine also a 3D reconstruction of the body, which in real time tells you how the different joints are moving at which velocity and how the angles are changing?
Yeah. Okay. Surely this is the next step. And it's surely better than only tracking the velocity. Yes. But I don't think that nowadays, just to take your speech to an extreme point, I think that nowadays we don't have the technological resources to make the powerlifting training a science, because there are many other aspects. For example, yeah, you track the velocity and the joint velocity, the bar path, the bar acceleration. Yeah, you can do many things, but for example, how is left tonight, for example, or in which phase of the programming I'm in, because sometimes, as I said before, I can accept that the athlete is a little bit overloaded. And then another scientific thing, joint velocity is a factor, but the time of muscle activation is a factor that nobody thinks about. For example, if I do like a hip shift on the squat, is that I've got weak quads, or just that my hip uh, doesn't have a good time of activation, for example. So we cannot deduce our weaknesses or our for example, what do we have to do in the future by only tracking that with sensors or something like that. as I said before, I think that coaching is an art. And if we try to put in other factors, there will always be one other factor, and I think there are too much factors actually. So we don't have at the moment the technological resources to take to take this to the extreme.
Yeah. I mean, my take on this is that we don't have enough data more than technological resources, because technically it's pretty
Yeah,
feasible.
also.
Technically it's pretty feasible, because like if you look at Formula One, they they have huge compute, they run incredible simulations, but they have, first of all, an incredible budget, and second of all, they have a lot of data, right? um, I think that the analysis that in powerlifting we would have to come up with are actually simpler, but we don't have the data, because I try to ask my athletes to fill in a questionnaire with basic stuff about sleep, about their diet and how fuel they are feeling, uh, like simply the RP on each set, but most of them don't do it. Like they don't want to do it because it's too annoying, right? And so the
Yeah.
the big problem is data, actually.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Anyway, I think that Formula One, but actually any kind of machine is much, much, much more simple than the human body, because we've got something like 600 muscles, and every muscle can be strong or weak and has a different time of activation. And then every load percentage can change the balance of the body. So yeah, and then the shape of the athlete is not constant all over the year. So I think that the variables, the factors are too much to track. Yeah, maybe
Yeah, make
we we could have the technology, but as you said, we don't have the data, and we actually don't know. Yeah, we don't have the data in two aspects. One is that we don't have a long story about many athletes and many cases, so you cannot just write a rule about training. And the other one is that I don't think we can track all the datas, even if we're talking about just one lift, one rep. We should track very many factors. Too many, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to give you another example, for example, Getafe, the soccer team in Spain, they managed to reduce their injury rates by, I mean, basically like measuring a whole bunch of things and seeing what correlated with higher injury rates. So, like, for example, that's something that I think is feasible, but again, like people don't fill in their questionnaire, and also the budget is not there, right? I genuinely think that we could build a dashboard that gives you a red flag when an athlete is about to statistically be more likely to get injured, because maybe the workload is really high and they are feeling certain subjective signals as well, on top of objective stuff. Like, for example, um, in soccer they use uh, the jump, right? When the vertical jump decreases significantly, that's a signal that they take into account, to correlate that with injury rates. So I think that you could build something like that, but we don't have the data. Until probably until we can collect like 500, 1,000 athletes who keep training like constantly and constantly fill in their data for a few years, I think that's going to be unfeasible.
Yeah. I agree. And actually, I would say that, for example, tracking the result or the injury rate is a much better approach because, for example, yeah, in that case, you start from the result, which can be positive or negative if we're talking about obviously injuries. Then you start from that, and then you try to change the training factors that you tracked, obviously. But what I was talking about before is actually the biomechanics. If you start from the single small aspect, then you will not make it.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I see what you mean there. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I think a good question now is, what do you think about um, powerlifting in 10 years?
Mm. You mean in the world or in Italy?
Yeah, like in the world, I would say, like, what the state of things is going to be like in the world, but also in Italy, and what the typical life of an athlete will be, whether we will see someone hitting 140 IPF points, stuff like that.
Okay, first of all, I think that every future prediction in every aspect of lives always fails. So in politics, history, everything. But obviously, I hope that powerlifting will be better and bigger. But I think that we're almost at a breaking point where the athletes, yeah, where if you want to be an elite athlete, you almost must train as a professional. In powerlifting, we still don't have professional athletes like football, for example, where you actually become rich by only being an athlete. Actually, yeah, we've got Sheffield, but Sheffield, even if you win Sheffield, yeah, you will gain some money, which lets you live well for 1 year, but you cannot. For example, first of all, you cannot win Sheffield for 20 years in a row, but just because how the format is made, for example, with the world records. But I think that anyway, many people, if they want to be at a very very high level, they must train like professionals, even if they don't get the money of professionals. So this is the main problem. So people maybe don't work anymore, or yeah, most of all are coaches, but the majority of the podium of the words, they're not people who have a normal classical job. Mm, so yeah, so I think that the only way to raise the level and to have a higher number of strong athletes per category is only if everybody takes some money. So, for example, even the eighth or ninth place of a category, with who anyway is a very very strong athlete, could just train in their life, or maybe something small, yeah, something, or even something related to powerlifting. But if you work 10 10 hours a day in another job, and you want to become an elite athlete, it's very difficult. The risk is that you will only have very very few athletes which are lucky, which are maybe rich sometimes by their family, or they work in the gym but they don't work so many hours, or they just win Sheffield because they are masters. But for all the strong lifters, but who has anyway a normal life, that is the problem. There's a risk that they quit. Yeah. So I think that sponsorship is important. Social medias are important. That's why I like, yeah, podcasts like that. I like. I think that social medias could bring indirectly money to the athletes or to the coaches, and this is the only way, because at the moment I think that most of us are just moved by passion, and passion is good, but is not sustainable for a large number of people and for decades.
Yeah, of
So
course.
we will see. We will see.
Hmm. And what about 140 IPF points, which, by the way, is like Perkins with another 30, 40 kilos on his total?
Definitely yes. 5 years ago, I would have said no, but now maybe yes, because I saw that powerlifting is increasing in numbers, and there are always more gifted athletes from many countries uh, who reaches the very high level in few years. So I think that if athletes such as Agatha Sitko or Will Ball, who is very young, will train without injuries for 15 years, I don't see why they can't reach that level. I know that the human limit exists, but I don't think that the human limit is 130 IPF points. It's
Okay.
just that.
And
I think that if you take all the people in the world, uh, for example, let's say that all the people in the world are 15 years old, and all of them do professionally powerlifting, I think that there will be thousands and thousands of people without any doping over 140 IPF points, because the number of athletes is still too low. So I think that this is possible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, and also it's interesting because even in the US, um, probably the most talented athletes will do football or basketball,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they resort to powerlifting, sort of like, as a last resort. So it would be interesting if, a Michael Jordan type of athlete, instead of choosing basketball, chooses powerlifting. And then who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's close with this final question. Is there a question that you wish someone would ask you in an interview, but nobody ever does, and so you didn't have a chance to talk about it?
Yeah. Actually, the question is, what do you suggest to the mainstream powerlifting community at the moment? So I guess I have to give the answer
Yes.
also. The answer is, just watch watch something about equipped powerlifting and about Sovietic powerlifting, just because I know that American methods nowadays, especially in the social medias, uh, also due to a language factor, are much more accessible. But I think that many people are just losing that small part of powerlifting. And yeah, I would say 15 years ago, even 12 years ago, when I started, the the vast majority of powerlifting was Ukrainian or Russian, and it was equipped, and they used totally different methods. I think that, yeah, powerlifting, especially because of the classic powerlifting race, is changing. But I think that something of that old word will still be interesting nowadays and will be useful. Maybe you can just take something, for example, as I did for the deadlift pegging, for example. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, I think this was very interesting. I think this is going to be pretty atypical for the mainstream American listener. So yeah, I hope this was interesting for everyone. Thank you, Giuseppe, for being here. And yeah,
Thank you, Sam.
see you everyone next week.
Bye. Bye, everybody.